Hey friends, welcome back to the Destination Baby and Kids YouTube channel. This is Gina. I am here with you to do a 3 across installation. So we're actually going to make a couple of these videos, much to my cameraman's annoyance, because he's going to have to be helpful for 3 separate videos, but irrespective, we're going to do our best anyway. So please bear with us. We may have to move the camera for different shots. But what we're starting with here, I thought it would be most important, or like make the most sense, to start with a vehicle that's actually pretty challenging. So I have taken my car, which is a Mercedes CLA 250. If you're familiar with Mercedes, you know the C-Series is their smallest sedan. So this is a small car. This back seat is quite small, and as you can see, it has 3 seated positions, and in our 2 outboard positions, which means the 2 on either the driver and the passenger side, have the lower anchor attachments. Now, in my other videos where I discuss narrow car seats, I got into the specifics of which ones have good belt attachments and which one have good latch attachments. It's critical for a 3 across scenario that your car seat be able to utilize seat belts well. And people say, why is that? Twofold. One is you very likely don't have a latch position in the center. Most cars don't. Car manufacturers are not required to have 3 latched positions in a single row. They're only required to have 2. So 9 times out of 10, they will be on the outboard positions. Additionally, if you hook up a car seat here, that's going to center the car seat directly into this spot very, very specifically. If you're using a seatbelt, you have some freedom to scoot the seat either over to the left or right, depending on what your needs are. So in a 3 across situation, almost always, unless you're in a vehicle that has 3 separate latch positions and also the spacing to enable them to be centered correctly, you're going to be using seatbelt. So that being said, I'm not going to get a new car. I'm not going to get rid of my car, and I'm certainly, not going to be able to add more latches. So the parts of this scenario that I have in my control are which car seats I pick and the locations of where my hypothetical children are going to go. In this scenario, I have chosen 1 forward-facing child and 2 rear-facing children. And that being said, we're going to use a different seat for each child. Now, people are sometimes like, well, what 3 will fit across that are all identical? Realistically, it probably doesn't make sense to do identical seating because different seats fit into cars different ways in different positions. So usually a puzzle method works the best. So in this case, I'm thinking that probably a large convertible seat is being replaced by a different convertible seat and a forward-facing seat for an older child, and the infant seat would theoretically remain the same. But infant seats are 17 inches wide, so the one that I'm going to use in this video, you could sort of use a whole variety to stand in its place. Okay, that being said, a lot of information. Let's get into the seats themselves and placement and where they're going to go. So you'll get a lot of car seat technicians that will really hammer home that the center is the only spot to put the littlest baby in. And I'm not that type of technician. What I was taught is the safest place for any child is where the seat is correctly installed and correctly utilized every time, that doesn't have a frontal airbag and is one that the parents feel familiar with and is affordable to them. So I don't shame people about placement as long as it's not in front of a frontal airbag. We can work with what works for you. And in this case, I don't want to put 2 toddlers into this position, which opens up into traffic where I'm messing around with their harness while cars are zooming by. That doesn't work for me. So this position for me is going to be for the infant seat. That being said, I want the toddler who is rear facing to be able to enter the car and get to their seat. Having the most access means that the end seat, aka the passenger seat, will be my forward facing oldest child. This seat here is my rear facing seat with a base, because with the removal of that seat, either side will be able to be entered for the one that's sitting in the middle in the rear facing that's older than the newborn. This will make sense when I do it. So let's get started. For my middle seat position, as I said before, I only have the choice of what seats I do and where they go, because I'm not buying a new car. I'm starting with the Nuna Exec. So some people will say, that's wider than 17 inches. You're not going to be able to fit it. You will. And the reason why I'm picking this is threefold. One is that it has an anti-rebound feature. This is non-negotiable for me for a rear-facing car seat. In this case, if I were to pick a rear-facing car seat, I would want an anti-rebound feature. Secondly, this seat has excellent seatbelt installation. So when I'm ready to install it, it has what's called an open belt path, and I'm able to see exactly where the seatbelt goes. The other thing is that it is a rear-facing to 50 pounds, forward-facing to 65 pounds, then is also a booster seat. So it's a very strong value for dollar because I'm able to get an incredibly tight installation rear or forward-facing, and it meets a lot of needs in terms of different ages. So for me, in this scenario, this one I think makes a lot of sense. Also, it's relatively low profile, so taking a child in and out of it isn't really cumbersome. To go backward, we'll flip the chair around. Remember, this is not to replace a manual or a car manual. This is just us installing to show that this can be done in a really, really tight car with what I would point out are bad side bolsters and much more of a sports car configuration. So the seat is gonna go in, and then we're just gonna install it loosely. And that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. And people say, why would you do it loosely? We don't wanna do any major tightening until the very end. This is true when you build a lot of products that might have, like, let's say an Allen wrench and tightening screws. You'll get 90% of it assembled, but you don't do a final tightening of everything until everything is sort of together and assembled. That way everything goes together nicely. So here, I'm gonna pull up my buckle stock. In this scenario, my buckle stock is pliable, meaning it's movable. There are some cars where that's not the case. They are a total nightmare. We are going to do a 3-across install in one of those type of situations. And it's from the Tesla Model Y, probably like my least favorite car to do a 3-across in. But it happens all the time in Silicon Valley, so I've gotten pretty competent at it. So we'll go over that. Now, this one is in, but as you can see, it's not completely installed. We're just gonna leave it that way so that we have some flexibility to scoot it in either direction, depending on what our needs are. Now, I'll maybe have my cameraman come over here or find a spot that works for him, because now I'm gonna do this position with my Graco. So, for my forward-facing older child, I have elected to use the Graco Slimfit 3LX. This seat I didn't like for rear facing because it doesn't have an anti-rebound feature. It also doesn't have any lock-offs in rear facing mode. The thing about it that was kind of interesting is that in forward facing mode it absolutely does have a lock-off. So that's a piece that's going to clamp to the seatbelt to make this seat fit more tightly and more securely than we'd be able to get if it didn't have this piece. So I'm really thrilled about that. The other thing about this seat that's awesome is that it has, and I have preemptively set up these seats a little bit for my needs, so I did cheat in that regard. But we've got height adjustment that's very easy. The same is true on the Exec, so we're able to adjust it depending on our child's growth needs without uninstalling and reinstalling the seat, which was also important for me. Just getting my top tether situated. We would always do that step. However, for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna go over regular installation here without it. We're gonna open up our belt lock off, and then we're gonna run our seatbelt through our forward-facing belt path. People say, but the seat's crooked. It's not set up perfectly. It's not supposed to be, because remember, we're not tightening everything until the very end. So, I have plenty of space here to be able to get at my belt buckle, because all of these pieces are movable at this point still. And there we are, buckled and sitting in the general right vicinity. And then in theory, we would have the top tether set up. My top tether in this car is extremely difficult to do based on the positioning of the actual piece in the vehicle. There's nothing wrong with the car seat. It's just too frustrating to try and do with the angle of the windshield in this garage. So, this guy I know I'm gonna want scooted as close to the door as humanly possible. The reason I know that is because over there, when we do our infant seat, the seat is gonna drop into a base and come out of the base. And in order to do that, we want as much space as possible. So I'm actually gonna pull this guy over pretty far and tighten down this one first instead of the center seat, which I'm sure some people find a little surprising, but I think it makes perfect sense for me. And I'm really going to scoot this as far as I possibly can over. And then we will go ahead and close the lock off, just like that. And then, provided that I had done the top tether, the seat would be correctly installed. And it's not moving more than an inch from its installation point. Sorry, one of my lights went out. Hey friends, welcome back. We've got the lights readjusted and now we will get this guy situated correctly. We just finished installing our Graco forward facing for our older child. This one is installed, but like I said, it's not tightened down all the way. I'm gonna do that tightening now because eventually I'm gonna have the infant seat over here. So in order to get this one tight, just gonna scoot it close as possible to this one over here. And I did check with these companies. These seats can touch. They just don't want them affecting each other's installation or angles, was the information I got from both Graco and Nuna when I inquired. Because these companies, they know that people want to use them in a 3 across scenario, especially if they're marketed as narrow. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this guy closed up. Now typically here, I would lock this seatbelt off as the last step. I'm not gonna do that until I get my final seat done here, because if I do wanna move this at all, I wanna have a little bit of flex in the seat. So now as you can see, I have clear access to my latches. In theory, I could latch the seat in, but I don't think that's gonna provide enough space for the infant seat to drop down into the base. I am using a Clek Liing. Clek makes convertible seats that are very narrow as well. We will use a Clek in one of our other 3 across videos, the convertible style. But just for now, for the infant seat, this was going to be my choice because it has the anti-rebound feature of the stability load leg, and it has one of the best seatbelt clamps out of any of the infant seats that I've ever worked with, meaning that I'm able to install it and scoot it to wherever I need to be and clamp down tightly on the seatbelt to get a tight installation no matter where on the seat it is. So it could be very centered, or I can have it way over to the side, which is what we're going to do in this case. So I pulled the seat all the way over here. Let's get the load leg up, just so people don't think I'm cheating. But we want the seat to have full contact here. I'm going to install this component with the seat belt. I'm going to run my belt through here. Now, I don't have to go crazy tightening this because it will be tightened up once this guy clamps down. And as I said, I really want to scoot it over, get that down, have this come down and touch the ground. Typically this will turn green. At the bottom I should have taken my floor mat out, but that's all right. So now the seat's not moving more than an inch from its installation point, so that's correctly installed. And we will, remember, we'll still have to lock that off, but otherwise we should be able to lock our infant seat in. So as you can see, we have newborn, older rear-facing child, forward-facing child. At this point, now that I know nothing's moving, I would lock this off by pulling it all the way out and letting it install like that, making sure that that's locked off. This lock-off works on the seat itself, and that one works on the seat itself. Of course, we would top tether that. But this is going to be 3 kids in the back of a very small Mercedes 4-door. And we didn't have to buy a new vehicle or trade our lives away or sell our soul to the devil. So this is very exciting. This is good news. Just shows what's possible when you understand why specific things matter on car seats and why certain seats work best in certain types of positionings versus others. If you have questions or have comments, please feel free to leave them at the bottom. If you have any friends who might benefit from this type of information, please feel free to have them like and subscribe. You could do so as well. If you have questions about your vehicle and maybe what might work, feel free to ask. But in general, we want seats that are roughly 17 inches wide. All the infant seats are going to be. They may be slightly wider, but most of them are 17 inches. The larger size seats is where it's generally more problematic, and you do have some options. Check out my video about narrow car seats just to see what all your choices might be. This is just one example, and again, not meant to replace manuals, just having fun showing you cool things that cars are capable of with the correct information. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our Tesla 3 Across video and in our massive Kia Telluride 3 Across video. Thank you.